A couple of hours ago, I heard somebody talking outside my house. I ended up recording the scariest experience of my life. Author unknown. This was at about 1:10 a.m. I was about to fall asleep when I started hearing a voice outside my house. This isn't too unusual in itself, but after a minute or two, I began to hear guttural sounds that bordered on straight-up demonic, coming from the front of the house. I got out of bed and looked through the window to see a guy a few houses up the street, talking or arguing or something with himself, but in a voice that sounded like he was in desperate need of an exorcism.
Nex adu immortalis, libri spondeo nex, adve hoc mort animadvertor, operor non timeo, valus est proculamus.
Before reaching the window, I had grabbed my phone and started recording him. I knew exactly how this shit would sound without some proof, so I covered my ass. As I was recording this guy, I was watching his progress down the street, through the opening between two curtains. Since I had all the lights off in my room, I didn't think I was visible at all. As he walked under a streetlight, I was able to make out some details about his appearance. He was an older man with longish hair, carrying what appeared to be a plastic grocery bag full of something. He was slowly making his way down the street, walking on the side opposite my house. I think he spent some time arguing with my neighbor's dogs, as they were all flipping out. He continued growling at himself until he was directly across the street from my window. That's when he stopped walking, became completely silent, then growled, almost in a sing-song way.
Are you looking at me?
I froze. He turned and stared right at me. I started breathing heavily, hoping he had said something else, praying that he wasn't actually looking at me. He then resumed his demonic gurgling growls and started walking right towards my window. At this point, I backed the fuck away from the window and ran to the living room where we keep a pistol in the cabinet. After retrieving the weapon, I ran to wake up my dad. It didn't take more than about 20 seconds from the time I left the window, but when I returned, he was nowhere to be seen. My dad didn't take me seriously, so he went back to bed, despite my pleas for him to stay awake with me. I'm terrified. I haven't seen the guy since I left the window, several hours ago, but I have heard him. Once, barely audible, about an hour ago. I don't know what he said, or if he even said anything, but I know it was him. The sun's coming up pretty soon, so I'm feeling a lot better now than I was when I posted this. I'm going to try to get a few hours of sleep before my class at 11. Cursed Remains by the Prowler. I stare at the heart of the candlelit flame, surrounded by darkness in the seclusion of my study. The echoes from the voices that are being carried through the windswept halls of this ancient manor are speaking to me. In an ominous tone, they communicate their aspirations of woe and torment that wither my mind and plague my soul. This once lively home that was filled with warmth and laughter has become a retreat of sadness and pain with the passing of its more innocent residents. I have become the last branch on my once strong-rooted familial tree that has now blackened from whatever curse that had caused it to rot. One by one, I have lost my loved ones, my beautiful wife, my lovely children, the futures of this family taken away by the evil that lurks this manor's halls. I think I could take solace in my seclusion if the voices I heard were that of my loved ones, but sadly, I know it not to be. These malevolent voices instead torment my every thought and action. What do they want from me? Why do they continue to let me live? I've accepted my stewardship of maintaining my ancestral home, aging as it does, for I know I shall never leave, never be with my family once again, for I know I am cursed. I'm so sorry, by the woolly mammoth. I haven't seen your smile in a long time, she said. His crooked grin got a little wider as she ruffled his hair lightly. Her eyes lingered on his. You don't come around much anymore. She said this playfully and suddenly, but her face betrayed a little pain. It was true. He hadn't visited her in a long time. He hadn't seen anyone in months. Guilt and regret pushed him now to reconnect with her. Sorry, Mom. I don't see many people nowadays. I'm busy with work. A lie, but he wasn't sure how to tell her the truth. But what was the truth? He was no longer her sweet boy, baby-faced and innocent. The years had worn him down like an old shoe. He felt he merely occupied an empty shell, and very little of his old self remained. But he could not tell her the truth, for the simple fact that he did not know how. I know you're busy. I just miss you. She gave a small sigh and pulled him into a hug. A vaguely familiar wave of happiness played across his heart, and the emptiness seemed bearable. They enjoyed each other's company, surrounded by a hazy glow neither seemed to notice, and talked about nothing in particular for a long time. He gave her his full attention and cherished their moment. His regret dissolved into nothing, and their bond was unbreakable. They drank tea and walked together. They reminisced about his childhood, and she told him how much he meant to her. The oblivion had forced him into solitude, but he decided he would show her again how much he loved her. Suddenly, the glow began to fade, and his heart became heavy as her face dulled. She backed away from him and disappeared. A slow beeping sound rose from nowhere, and he felt an invisible hand on his shoulder. Ripped from his dream, he found the room he now occupied was cold and sterile. A doctor pulled her hand away and looked at him with sympathy and sadness. Reality pulled him violently into the present, and he remembered the call about a car accident in the middle of the night. His mother had suffered traumatic injuries to her chest and was bleeding internally. They said she had very little time left. He crossed the room to her bed. He had not spoken to his mother in months, and now all he wanted was to throw himself into her arms. A beeping monitor attached to her chest began to slow, as she opened her fading eyes and looked up at him. "I haven't seen your smile in a long time." Non-Starter by the Woolly Mammoth. The flickering light of a dying fire sent strange silhouettes dancing across the fabric of his tent. He rolled over in his sleeping bag and tried again to ignore the sounds from the forest. Seconds later, something began scratching against pine bark. He had seen enough raccoons on the way to his campsite to explain the sound, but his paranoia grew all the same. As an adult, he knew the fiends and ghouls he had feared in his youth only lived in his mind, but their hold had been strong. Gathering his courage, he had set out on a lonely camping trip to prove himself a man. Deciding against sleep, he put his shoes on, fed the fire the last of his stockpiled wood, and sat on a rock with his back to the flames. New shadows sprang from his lively fire, and the dense forest seemed to dance to a noiseless tune. Noiseless, except now he could hear a song. It was faint, but from an outcrop of rocks behind his campsite started an eerie chorus. He stood up and silently moved toward the rock face, noticing a crevasse he had not seen before. The sound grew louder. Terrified, he froze in front of the narrow cave and heard the song transform into a hideous echoed chant. Guttural, snarling sounds accompanied his new clamor and drove fear deep into his heart. Visions of demons and witches flooded his mind and destroyed all rational thought. He bolted. His car was parked off the main highway less than a half a mile away, but there was no trail for him to follow. He sprinted wildly through the dark underbrush in the direction of the road. Suddenly, his feet left the path, and he felt his stomach rise into his throat. He wheeled, but the ground was no longer under him. Confusion and panic consumed him. Less than 5 seconds later, he landed feet first onto a pile of boulders at the bottom of a ravine, shattering every bone in his legs and pelvis. At daybreak, a large family of boreal wolverines wandered out of the crevasse to inspect an empty tent and the smoldering remains of the fire. They found a meager meal and quietly crept back to their craggy den. Most Helpful Review by Mr. Evil, Dr. Agent Smith. Monotot's Baby View, C30. Most Helpful Reviews. Jane Clement, 6/5/2021. Our first baby monitor was the standard audio-only fare, and it simply didn't do the trick. Often we'd miss our baby waking up altogether. Until he was fully awake and screaming the house down. Other times, we'd hear movements or what sounded like little whines or even whispering, strangely, then look in and see a sleeping 7-month-old. Absolutely useless. So I was very happy to find this video monitor at a reasonable price. It's short on the bells and whistles, but it does what we need it to. Impressed that it even has infrared for night vision. We've had it a month, and we're mostly pleased with it. The main thing we've learned is our little one wakes in the night much more than we thought. Silently, he will sometimes open his eyes, little black beads in the dark on the infrared, and stare at the monitor camera. I think he finds it reassuring, like he knows Mommy and Daddy are watching over him. But he'll stay there and stare into the camera, unblinking, for as much as an hour at a time. We suppose he isn't actually awake, and he closes his eyes when we go and check, so we've learned to leave him to it. He's certainly no more tired for it in the morning. My only criticism is that the audio component is easily as bad as our previous monitor, though with the picture, it's less important. We still hear strange sounds, bumps, movement, and so on, but look at the screen and see a contentedly sleeping baby. The occasional whispering sound is unsettling, though. And one time, my husband was very upset, insisting he had heard a distant, wild roaring sound like a lion or bear. In the UK, I find that unlikely. We think the unit must be interfering with TV or radio channels, although this hasn't been reported in other reviews, so who knows? We complained to the manufacturer. Unfortunately, they refused to send me a replacement, which I found disappointing. So, while this monitor has given us some reassurance about our baby's sleep, I wish we didn't need it. The other night I got the fright of my life, woken in the early hours by the sound of a screaming baby. Coming over the monitor, very distraught, very suddenly. So sure it was my little boy's cry. It was like when he had his vaccinations, like he was scared and in pain. But on the video, our baby appeared completely fine. He was fully awake, sitting bolt upright for the first time ever, staring straight ahead, right into the camera lens. He was looking straight at us. His little black eyes were glinting in the dark, and he smiled, this thin, tight smile, while over the speaker, my little baby boy just screamed and screamed and screamed. Big Al's Demon Wins by the Prowler. My name is Berwin Jones.
Berwin?
I'm a traveling suppository salesman. Pills, devices, and booklets. Whatever it is that you need to help you go, I've got you covered. No one can beat our blowout prices. I'm traveling through the Midwest as we speak, hitting up rich gated communities and retirement homes, my biggest clientele. After I had been on the road for quite some hours, I heard on the radio a breaking urgent weather warning as I entered Illinois of an impending snowstorm heading my way. I started to get panicked because I was not near a rest stop or roadside motel. Suddenly, to make matters worse, my car blew a flat tire, and I needed to find shelter. I was surrounded by woodland, and not a soul was out. After half a mile on 3 tires, I finally struck luck and saw an old withered sign advertising Big Al's roadside meats and treats at the next turn. So at the next exit, I turned onto an old side road that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. Around the bend, I saw the old dilapidated diner sitting amongst its woodland backdrop, abandoned and run down. Well, I won't be getting anything to eat or drink, I guess, I sarcastically thought. Thank goodness I stopped and got a beef stacker burger from a fast food joint called Rita's Beefy Burgers back on the highway. I pulled up and parked in the front parking spot by the door and got out. The cold winds were already here and blistering the side of my face. I hurriedly made my way to the door and knelt down and stuffed myself into the broken door panel. I was immediately hit with the smell of old decaying grease. I lit my cigarette lighter and decided to explore the room I was going to be spending the night in. It was dark, damp, and eerie, as you might expect. I had to maneuver my way past a few turned-over tables and chairs. The place literally looked as if it had been abandoned for decades. I came to the wall on the far side of the room, next to the doors leading to the kitchen. On the wall, I saw a picture of a few gentlemen hugging each other, surrounding a nice, smiling, portly gentleman who I'm assuming was Big Al. I was beginning to get very cold, and I could hear the hollow winds echoing throughout the decaying building. I thought I'd make my way to the kitchen to see if by any chance any of the burners could be lit to get some kind of heat going. Just as I put my hand on the door, however, I heard some pots and pans start clamoring from the back, loud and continuous banging until an abrupt silence. I stood frozen in fear, cheeks clenched. I didn't know what to do. Then I heard a sharp noise break the silence. Then a loud voice yelled,
Hey, pal. Welcome to Big Al's. I'm Big Al.
I pushed open the door and saw that same portly gentleman, except in spirit form. He was covered in sweat and grease, slaving over his eternal stove. Then I heard again followed by quite the foul smell. "What is that noise?" I exclaimed, and Big Al laughed.
Ha ha. Oh, that's nothing. Just the demon winds, I call them.
A cloud of green began to emanate from behind him as he said it. The demon winds turned out to be spectral farts. He said he wanted to do anything in his power to keep me warm from the storm. He said he knew what it was like to die from the cold. He died in the meat locker when the kid on staff accidentally locked him in. Big Al kept me company to pass the storm, telling me stories of the past, and when the sun rose the next morning, he disappeared. While this wasn't a typical scary ghost story, I still met a ghost and had a unique experience, to say the least. Something I will never forget on my travels. Strange sound, unknown author. So I'm browsing Reddit at 1 a.m. because I can't sleep. It's dark and quiet, and I'm all bundled up against the cold. Outside, a foot of snow absorbs the usual nighttime sounds from the woods behind my house. Suddenly, I hear what sounds like faint music, as if someone left a radio on in the tool shed. I strain to hear it, but the sound is gone. Okay, I think. Just my mind playing tricks. Back to Reddit. I hear it again. This time it sounds like the same part of a song, played over and over, like it's being looped. I get up with my heart in my throat and walk to the upstairs landing. Nothing. I stand still, barely breathing, but the sound is gone. Okay, what the F? I go back to bed. Nothing for about 5 minutes, but then it's back. The sound is becoming familiar now. Not like I can recognize the tune, but like I can hear nuances, different sounds within the loop that weren't apparent at first. Now I'm really creeped out because it's starting to sound less like music and more like one of those rusty metal playground seesaws moving in the wind. The squeaky sway, giving it the rhythmic sound I mistook for music. Only there's no wind and no playground near my place, and the nearest neighbor is more than a mile away. I'm up again, and this time I can still hear it on the landing, and it's making me crazy because it's not louder or softer, but the same volume even though I've moved to a different part of the house. Like it's effing following me. There's something new to it now, like a high-pitched shriek right at the beginning, still barely audible like the rest of it. But it's like the sound is evolving, changing just enough each time I hear it to keep me interested and attentive. It's gone again, almost like it knew I was talking about it. Well, now I'm determined to figure it out, because it's going to drive me crazy if I don't. I'm sitting in my dark living room, doing that stupid thing where I keep the lights off because I think I can hear better in the dark. I'm wearing my down jacket, gloves, knit cap, and boots. I've got a flashlight in my pocket, and I'm just waiting for the sound to start up again. And I don't care how cold it is outside. When I hear it, I'm going to... There it is. Be right back. The Old House. Author unknown. The old house on the hill has been abandoned for years, but there are those who say it's still inhabited by the spirits of the previous owners. Some say the house is cursed, and those who enter never come out again. Local teenagers sometimes dare each other to spend a night in the house, but no one has ever been brave enough to stay until morning. One night, two friends decided to take on the challenge. They brought along a video camera to document their stay. The first thing they noticed was the eerie silence that surrounded the house. It was as if the very air was thick with tension. They set up the camera in the living room and started exploring. It didn't take long for them to realize they were not alone. They could hear strange noises coming from the upstairs bedroom. It sounded like someone was walking around up there. They went upstairs to investigate and found the bedroom door was slightly ajar. When they peeked inside, they saw something that froze them in fear. There was a figure standing in the corner of the room, just staring at them. The figure was completely shrouded in darkness, and they couldn't make out any features, but they could feel an evil presence emanating from it. They slowly backed out of the room, too scared to even move. The figure followed them, staying in the corner of the room as if it was guarding something. They ran downstairs and tried to make a break for the front door, but the figure was right behind them. They could feel its cold breath on their necks as it chased them through the house. They finally made it outside and ran as fast as they could. They never looked back, and they never went near that house again. There's something trying to open my window at night. Let me preface my story by saying this. I've never been afraid of noises from outside my window, ever. Even when I was little, I never had a problem with it. There could be constant rustling in the leaves or the bushes next to the house, and I would still be out like a light. Now, that's not to say I've never been afraid of anything coming in the house. That scares me just like it does the next guy. But I've got screens, locks, and an alarm on my window. I never was really afraid of anyone sneaking into my room. To be honest, though, I never really used the locks or the alarm. I live with my parents, and their room is on the second floor, but mine is on the first. So sometimes late at night, I'd pull the screen out of my window and sneak out to be with my girlfriend at the time. I'd be gone for about 2 or 3 hours, and then I'd return, put the screen back in, close the window, and go to bed. It started out being an occasional thing, but she seemed to like the idea of sneaking out late at night, so I just started leaving my window alarm off and my window unlocked. Why go through the trouble of re-securing everything if I'm just going to go back out the next night? As the trips outside at night became more frequent, I'd find leaves and dirt on the carpet in my room. It was at most annoying. I didn't remember tracking in that much dirt, but it was dark, so I knew I more than likely just couldn't see it stuck to my shoes. My biggest problem was just trying not to get caught by my parents. The window made a horrible creaky noise as it closed, and though it probably wasn't as loud as it seemed to me, my heart started racing every time I heard it. The panic played tricks on my senses and intensified every noise I heard thereafter. I kept thinking I heard my parents' footsteps coming towards my room, but when I'd turn around, it'd be nothing. My door was still closed. I knew I was just getting worked up over nothing, but it stressed me out to no end. Eventually, my girlfriend and I broke up, and I had no reason to sneak out anymore. To be honest, it was kind of a relief, not having to worry about being caught every night. The first night after the breakup, I fell asleep in a matter of minutes. I woke up at about 3 or 4 a.m. to some scratching noise outside of the house. I would have gotten up to look, but it was cold in my room, and I was already under the blankets, so I stayed put, hoping I would be able to fall back asleep. When I woke again, I got up to see what had scratched against my window. My screen was slashed open. By far not the worst thing an ex had done to me, so I shrugged it off and forgot about it. Next week, I woke up again at 4 a.m., and my window was scratched. I'd even venture to say it had been clawed. In the morning, I showed my parents the window. They both agreed it was probably some animal. We have plenty of coyotes here, and though they've never heard of them clawing at windows, they figured it couldn't have been anything else. But my window was strong enough to keep it out. The next night, I woke up at 2 a.m. Someone had opened the window. For a brief moment, I just lay there staring at it in disbelief. I didn't open the window, or at least I don't remember doing it. I sighed. I'd have to get up to close it. If it really was an animal that clawed my window, I didn't want it crawling inside. And besides that, it was cold outside. I was about to move, but my bedroom door opened first. The head that peeked out from behind the door was not human. I panicked, and my eyes snapped shut. I couldn't erase the images I'd just seen, like a black silhouette, almost a walking shadow with wide, empty eyes. I hoped it didn't know I saw it. I hoped it ignored me. I hoped it didn't know I was awake. I was trying not to breathe too loudly, but I was so afraid. I was trying not to cry. Panic was again playing tricks on my senses. I wasn't sure if I was hearing my heartbeat or footsteps. It was most likely both. The footsteps got louder, then quieter, closer, then farther. The thing was looking around my room. It got closer to my bed and lingered. I could feel it touching my blankets. I could hear it breathing. I could no longer trust myself to breathe slowly. I held my breath and waited. The sound of breathing got closer, and I could feel warmth just inches away from my face. And then it left. I heard footsteps leaving, and the creak of my window closing. I started breathing short, shallow breaths, but wouldn't open my eyes. They stayed closed until the sun came up. When I opened my eyes, there were leaves and dirt on the carpet. I never sleep with my window unlocked anymore. White Noise by Geeky Lee. I hear things that aren't there, shouldn't be there. I hear them in the quiet noises, the liminal noises, the background hum. The drone of a steady fan, a washing machine, humming and whooshing about its work. The blood rushing around my system when I wear earplugs. It's like a radio, but the sounds are just far enough out of reach that I can't quite tell what's being said. I know I recognize that music, though, and those voices, so familiar. Sometimes I think I hear them say my name. I made a plan. I'm meditating. I'm putting the fan on, the one that brings the voices closest, and I'm focusing on it, shutting everything else out. And it's working. Every night, I get a little bit closer. Or I did. The snatches of music and voices are agonizingly still, just out of reach, and I'm stuck in place. I can't get to them, but they're definitely saying my name. So I bought a white noise machine, and I've set it up with the fan. It's a bit of a racket, but once I get the levels and positioning right, it's actually quite wonderful. This will get me there. I know it will. It is. It's doing it. I can hear the music, the voices. They're so happy to finally be able to talk to me. They're reaching out from another dimension? Huh? That matches some of my theories, sure. Why me? I asked that first. They said I'm unusually receptive, and they've been trying to bring me to them for ages, since I was young. No wonder it all sounds so familiar. They have a job for me, and if I do it, I'll be able to join them. I'll be one of them. They're the ruling class of their dimension, and I'm a nothing here. Nobody, no family, no friends, and I do my job from home and only ever speak to people by email or messenger. Maybe the baristas down the road might notice I stopped coming in. That'll be all. And I could be something better, something more, just anything but what I am now. All I have to do is draw some things in my blood on the wall, some weird picture type things, and open the door for them. then I'll be somebody. Here goes. Exploding Head Syndrome. Author unknown. I used to think I was insane or hallucinating until I found out about exploding head syndrome. It normally happens just before I wake up, as I'm waking up, or it will actually wake me up. I'll bolt up out of bed because I'll hear a loud crash in the house or outside my window. It sounds like someone dropped a heavy glass object or even someone slamming a cupboard door. Anyway, it's loud. Loud enough to wake me up and go investigate, only to find nothing. I hate it, and it's weird. Anyone else experience this? Strange truck with flashing lights driving up and down my neighborhood. Author unknown. I usually go to sleep between 2 and 3 a.m., so I was awake when this happened. I had just shut off my gaming console for the night when I was laying in bed watching YouTube when I heard the strange high-pitched rumbling of a vehicle in the distance. I had thought none of it, but it slowly grew louder and louder. The first time it passed by, I had thought it was an airplane or helicopter overhead. The second time it happened, it had caught my attention. Before I go any further, I have to clear something. I live almost exactly in the middle of my neighborhood, with the main street being next to my house. It's an intersection where you can get anywhere from the main streets. This can be pretty good, but it can also be bad, as I hear pretty much any loud noise that happens upon the area. As I was saying, it was 12 a.m. sharp when it started. The truck drove up and down the neighborhood, and by the third time it passed by, I was ready. It came from the street in front of my house, and it was driving facing me. I started recording, but my damn flash was on. I quickly turned it off, but I think it was too late. The truck drove up to my house, stopped for a good 5 seconds, and then made a U-turn and drove back the way it came from. I did manage to record it then, but the sound is not that good. I did get a good clip of the sound in the end, though. Okay, now that I said that, this is where it gets scary. It was a white pickup truck with flashing yellow lights on top of it. I had thought it was a worker's truck, but I had failed to see any logos on it. Remember, it drove in front of my house 3 times, so I saw all angles. It appeared to go into every street and pass in front of every house. How do I know this? I've lived in my neighborhood for more than 10 years, so I know it like the back of my hand. I have superb hearing, so I could hear it go into every street and dead end. I had thought they were looking for something, but what construction worker works at 12 a.m.? After doing this, it then quickly left my area and did the same for the rest of the neighborhood, going into every street. We do have security, but they are always logoed, so this truck with no logos confused me. This is not the first time I heard it. I had always thought it was a plane or something, but this was the first time I got a recording of it. It's 12:43 now, and I can't hear it anymore. I think it left. If any of you know what this is and why it was acting so strange, can you please let me know? I have never heard of something like this before. Another thing, the days that it happens are completely random, so I believe date doesn't affect when it comes. I'm new to Reddit, so I don't know how to post videos, so if someone could tell me, thanks. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.